There is a moment that arrives in every human life, though most will spend their entire existence running from it. It is the moment when the mask you have been wearing since childhood begins to slip, and you catch a glimpse of the face beneath it, a face you may not recognize, a face that has been waiting in the darkness of your own being for decades, patient as stone, silent as the space between stars. This is the moment when the universe extends its hand toward you, not in judgment, but in invitation, and asks a question so simple it shatters everything you thought you knew about yourself. Who are you when no one is watching? Who are you when there is nothing left to prove, no role left to perform, no audience left to convince? Who are you in the terrible and beautiful silence of your own aloneness? Terence McKenna understood this question better than most. He understood that the entire architecture of modern civilization is built upon a foundation of pretense, a collective agreement to ignore the deeper dimensions of existence in favor of a flattened, sanitized, commercially viable version of reality. He saw that we are born into a world that immediately begins the process of programming us, shaping us, molding us into acceptable forms, forms that serve the machine, forms that don't ask too many questions, forms that consume without questioning and produce without creating. And he understood that the price of this programming is nothing less than our souls, our authentic connection to the mystery that pulses at the heart of existence. But here is what McKenna also understood, and what so few are willing to accept. The universe is not indifferent to your authenticity. It is not a cold, mechanical system grinding along without awareness of your inner state. The cosmos, in ways that our rational minds struggle to comprehend, is responsive. It is listening. It is waiting. And when you finally drop the pretense, when you finally stop performing the role that was assigned to you and begin the terrifying work of discovering who you actually are, something shifts. The very fabric of reality reorganizes itself around your new configuration. Doors that were invisible suddenly become visible. Pathways that were blocked suddenly open. People appear as if summoned by some unseen hand. Circumstances align in ways that feel like more than coincidence. The universe, it seems, upgrades you when you stop pretending. This is not magical thinking in the cheap sense. This is not the shallow positive thinking of self-help books that promise you can manifest a parking space through visualization. This is something far more profound and far more demanding. Because stopping pretending is not easy. In fact, it may be the hardest thing a human being can do. We have been pretending for so long that we have forgotten we are pretending. The mask has grown into our skin. The role has become indistinguishable from the actor. We defend our pretenses with the ferocity of someone defending their very existence, because in a sense, we are. The false self does not want to die. It has its own agenda, its own survival instinct, its own desperate need to continue. McKenna spoke often about the concept of the felt presence of direct experience, the radical idea that truth cannot be inherited, cannot be handed down from authority figures, cannot be extracted from books or lectures or sacred texts. Truth must be encountered directly, in the raw and unmediated confrontation between your consciousness and reality itself. And this confrontation requires authenticity. It requires that you show up as you actually are, not as you have been told to be. It requires that you strip away the accumulated layers of cultural programming and social conditioning and stand naked before the mystery, vulnerable and open and utterly without pretense. Consider for a moment the nature of pretense itself. What does it mean to pretend? At its root, pretense is a form of lying, not the simple lying of stating falsehoods, but something more insidious, the lying of being false. When you pretend, you are not simply saying something untrue, you are being something untrue. You are inhabiting a false position, occupying a role that does not correspond to your actual inner state. And this creates a kind of friction, a dissonance between what you are projecting outward and what you are experiencing inward. This friction is not neutral. It has consequences. It creates a field of inauthenticity around you that affects everything it touches. McKenna observed that this field of inauthenticity is not just personal, it is collective. We live in a society built on pretense, maintained by pretense, defended by pretense. Our economic systems pretend that infinite growth on a finite planet is possible. Our political systems pretend that the theatre of elections represents genuine democracy. Our educational systems pretend that standardized testing measures anything meaningful about human potential. Our medical systems pretend that treating symptoms is the same as creating health. And beneath all of this institutional pretense lies the individual pretense of billions of human beings who have learned to wear masks so thoroughly that they have forgotten their own faces. But the universe operates according to different principles. Reality, at its deepest levels, has no tolerance for falsehood. This is not a moral judgment. It is simply the nature of things. Truth is that which corresponds to what actually is. Pretense is that which does not. And while pretense can be maintained for a time, while entire civilizations can be built on foundations of collective delusion, there comes a point when reality reasserts itself. The map is not the territory. The menu is not the meal. The mask is not the face. And the longer we confuse these things, the more painful the eventual correction becomes. What McKenna proposed was something radical, that the universe actively rewards authenticity. Not in the sense of a cosmic vending machine that dispenses prizes to the virtuous, but in the sense that reality itself becomes more accessible, more penetrable, more responsive when approached with genuine presence. The great mystical traditions have always understood this. The Zen masters spoke of showing up with beginner's mind, approaching each moment fresh, without the accumulated baggage of assumptions and expectations. The Sufis spoke of stripping away the veils that separate the seeker from the divine. The shamanic traditions spoke of dying to the old self so that a new self could be born. All of these traditions point to the same fundamental insight. Transformation requires authenticity. You cannot hack the system by pretending to be something you are not. This brings us to one of McKenna's most provocative ideas, that the universe is not a thing, but a process, not a noun, but a verb. Reality is not a static backdrop against which we act out our little dramas. It is a dynamic, evolving, creative unfolding in which we are active participants. And our mode of participation matters. When we participate authentically, when we bring our true selves to the encounter, we become co-creators of reality in a way that is impossible when we are merely performing roles. The universe, in McKenna's view, is looking for partners, for collaborators, for beings who are willing to step into the creative process with their whole being. And it cannot find these partners among the pretenders, because pretense creates a barrier, a wall of falsehood that prevents the deeper exchange from occurring. Think about this in terms of your own experience. Think about the times in your life when you were genuinely, completely yourself, when you stopped calculating how you would be perceived and simply showed up as you were. These moments may have been rare. They may have been frightening. But were they not also the moments when something shifted? When life seemed to open up in unexpected ways? When connections formed that felt charged with significance? When insights arrived that felt like gifts from some deeper intelligence? The correlation between authenticity and transformation is not accidental. It is the very mechanism by which consciousness evolves. McKenna frequently spoke about the role of psychedelics in facilitating this process of becoming authentic. And while his advocacy for these substances is well known, it is important to understand the deeper principle at work. Psychedelics, in McKenna's view, were valuable not because they provided escape from reality, but because they stripped away the layers of pretense that normally shield us from reality. Under the influence of a sufficient dose of psilocybin or ayahuasca or DMT, the mask becomes transparent. The pretenses dissolve. The social persona, so carefully constructed over decades, simply ceases to function. And in that naked state, you are confronted with yourself, your actual self, the one that has been hiding behind the performance all along. This confrontation is not always pleasant. In fact, it is often terrifying. The false self does not go quietly. It fights for its existence with every weapon at its disposal: fear, shame, guilt, rage, despair. This is why so many psychedelic experiences involve what can only be called ego death, the complete dissolution of the constructed identity, the sense that you are being annihilated. But what is being annihilated is not your true self. It is the pretense. It is the accumulated falsehood that you have mistaken for yourself. And when this pretense dies, something else is revealed. The authentic being that was always there, waiting beneath the surface, timeless and patient, and utterly unconcerned with the dramas of the false self. But here is the crucial point. The psychedelic experience, as valuable as it can be, is only a tool. It is not the thing itself. The real work is learning to live from that place of authenticity in ordinary reality, in the midst of daily life, in the context of relationships and work, and the countless small interactions that make up a human existence. This is where the rubber meets the road. This is where the universe truly tests our commitment to authenticity, because it is relatively easy to be authentic in an altered state, when the normal constraints of ego and society have been chemically dissolved. It is much harder to be authentic in the checkout line at the grocery store, in the meeting with your boss, in the conversation with your family over holiday dinner. Yet this is precisely where the work must be done. McKenna understood that authenticity is not a destination, but a practice, not an achievement, but an ongoing commitment. Every moment presents a choice, to show up as you actually are, or to retreat into the familiar comfort of pretense. And this choice has consequences that ripple outward in ways we cannot fully anticipate. When you are authentic, you give others permission to be authentic. When you are false, you create an environment in which falsehood flourishes. We are all participating in a collective reality, and the quality of that reality depends on the quality of our participation. A world in which everyone is pretending is a world in which nothing real can happen. A world in which even a few individuals are authentically present is a world charged with potential. The universe upgrades you when you stop pretending, because authenticity aligns you with the deeper patterns of reality itself. When you are false, you are working against the grain of existence. You are expending enormous energy to maintain an illusion, to project an image, to defend a position that does not correspond to what actually is. This energy could be used for creation, for exploration, for genuine connection. Instead, it is burned up in the maintenance of pretense. But when you drop the pretense, this energy is suddenly available. You become lighter, more fluid, more capable of responding to the actual circumstances of your life, rather than the imagined circumstances created by your false self. There is a feedback loop at work here that McKenna intuited, but perhaps never fully articulated. Authenticity creates more authenticity. When you are genuine, reality responds by revealing more of itself to you. And as reality reveals more of itself, you are transformed by what you encounter. This transformation makes you more capable of further authenticity, which invites further revelation, which enables further transformation. It is a spiral, an ascending helix of becoming, a process by which consciousness evolves through its encounter with the real. And this process, once begun, takes on a momentum of its own. The universe, having found a willing partner, begins to pour itself into you in ways that would have been impossible when you were hiding behind your pretenses. The architecture of pretense is not something we consciously choose. It is not as if, at some definable moment in childhood, we made a deliberate decision to be false. Rather, pretense is installed in us through a process so gradual and so pervasive that it becomes invisible to us. We do not see it because we see through it. It becomes the lens through which we perceive everything, including ourselves. And this is why the work of becoming authentic is so difficult. We are not merely removing something external. We are dismantling the very structures through which we have learned to construct meaning and identity. McKenna spoke often about what he called culture as a kind of operating system, a set of programs that run in the background of our consciousness, shaping our perceptions, guiding our behaviors, limiting our possibilities. This cultural operating system is not neutral. It is designed, whether intentionally or not, to produce certain outcomes: compliant workers, passive consumers, obedient citizens. It achieves this by installing a particular version of reality in our minds, a version that serves the interests of the system rather than the interests of the individual. And central to this installed reality is a particular understanding of the self as separate, the self as competitive, the self as defined by external markers of success. This understanding of the self is itself a form of pretense, because it does not correspond to the deeper truth of what we are. Consider how the process of socialization works. From our earliest moments, we are taught to modulate our authentic impulses in favor of socially acceptable behaviors. The child learns that certain feelings are not supposed to be expressed, that certain questions are not supposed to be asked, that certain aspects of their being are not welcome in the social world. And so the child begins to construct a persona, a social self, that can navigate the demands of family and school and peer group. This persona is not the child's true self. It is a strategic adaptation, a survival mechanism, a way of getting along in a world that does not always welcome authenticity. But the problem is that over time, this adaptive persona becomes confused with identity itself. The mask grows into the face. The strategy becomes the self. And the original, authentic being, the one that existed before the socialization process began, is pushed deeper and deeper into the unconscious, eventually becoming so remote that its existence is forgotten entirely. Most adults walking around in the modern world have no memory of their authentic selves. They have been performing for so long that performance is all they know. And when asked who they really are, they can only point to the mask, because they have forgotten there is anything beneath it. McKenna saw this as a kind of tragedy, not a melodramatic tragedy, but a quiet, invisible tragedy that plays out in billions of lives. The tragedy is not that we suffer, although we do. The tragedy is not that we die, although we will. The tragedy is that we never really live. We never taste the fullness of our own existence because we are too busy maintaining the pretense, too busy performing the role, too busy defending the identity that was assigned to us rather than discovering the identity that was born with us. We spend our lives in a kind of sleep, dreaming that we are awake, and the dream is so convincing that we never think to question it. But the universe has ways of waking us up. Sometimes these are gentle nudges, a book that falls off a shelf, a stranger who says exactly what we need to hear, a dream that refuses to be forgotten. Sometimes they are more forceful interventions, an illness, a loss, a crisis that shatters the comfortable structures we have built around ourselves. And sometimes, for those who are paying attention, there is simply a growing sense of unease, a feeling that something is not quite right, a suspicion that the life we are living is not the life we were meant to live. This unease is itself a form of communication from the deeper self, a signal that the pretense is no longer sustainable, that the time has come for something more authentic to emerge. McKenna frequently pointed to the indigenous understanding of reality as a corrective to our modern amnesia. In traditional cultures, the individual was never seen as a separate, isolated entity, competing against other separate, isolated entities. The individual was understood as a node in a vast web of relationships with ancestors, with spirits, with the land, with the cosmos itself. And this web of relationships required authenticity to function properly. When a member of the community was false, the entire web was disturbed. Healing rituals, vision quests, rites of passage, all of these were technologies for restoring authenticity, for bringing the individual back into proper relationship with the larger whole. We have lost these technologies, or rather, we have rejected them in favor of technologies that serve the machine rather than the soul. Our therapies are designed to help us function better within the system, not to question the system itself. Our religions have largely become institutions for managing social behavior rather than facilitating genuine encounter with the sacred. Our schools teach us to compete and conform, not to question and create. And so we wander through life without the maps and tools that our ancestors possessed, trying to find our way back to ourselves using instruments that were never designed for that purpose. But here is the thing that McKenna understood, and that gives hope to the seeker. The authentic self cannot be destroyed. It can be buried, ignored, forgotten, denied, but it cannot be destroyed. It waits in the depths of our being with infinite patience, like a seed in frozen ground, ready to sprout the moment conditions become favorable. And the conditions become favorable through authenticity. Every genuine act, every honest word, every moment of real presence creates a crack in the shell of pretense through which the light of the authentic self can shine. We do not have to become authentic all at once. That would be impossible. We only have to begin. We only have to make the first move in the direction of truth, and the universe responds. This is what McKenna meant when he spoke of reality as self-revealing or self-disclosing. Reality is not hiding from us. We are hiding from it. Our pretenses create a barrier that prevents us from perceiving the deeper dimensions of existence. But when we begin to lower this barrier, when we begin to show up as we actually are, reality begins to show itself as it actually is. The two movements are connected. Our authenticity calls forth the authenticity of the cosmos. Our willingness to be real creates a space in which reality can be real with us. This principle operates at every level of existence. In personal relationships, we experience it as the difference between superficial connection and genuine intimacy. When both parties are pretending, the relationship remains on the surface, pleasant perhaps, but never truly nourishing. But when one party takes the risk of authenticity, when one person drops the mask and reveals their actual inner state, it creates an invitation for the other to do the same. And when this invitation is accepted, the relationship is transformed. Suddenly there is depth, meaning, the sense of actually meeting another human being, rather than merely exchanging pleasantries with another mask. The same principle operates in our relationship with the natural world. McKenna was deeply concerned with what he called the deanimation of nature, the modern tendency to view the natural world as dead matter, to be exploited, rather than living presence to be encountered. This deanimation is itself a form of pretense, a way of denying the obvious aliveness and intelligence that pervades the biological world. And this pretense has consequences. When we approach nature as dead, it responds to us in kind. We see only resources, only raw materials, only problems to be solved. But when we approach nature as alive, as conscious in its own way, as worthy of genuine relationship, something different happens. The forest reveals itself differently to the logger and to the shaman. Not because the forest is different, but because the mode of encounter is different. McKenna's experiences with plant medicines convinced him that the natural world is far more intelligent and communicative than our culture acknowledges. He spoke of plant teachers, entities that seem to possess knowledge and intentionality, that could communicate directly with human consciousness under the right conditions. Whether we understand this literally or metaphorically, the underlying insight remains profound. Authenticity opens channels of communication that pretense closes. When we approach the natural world with genuine curiosity and respect, it responds in ways that seem almost personal. Synchronicities multiply. Insights arise unbidden. The sense of being in conversation with something larger than ourselves becomes impossible to deny. And at the cosmic level, this same principle operates in what McKenna called the oversoul, or the transcendental object at the end of time. His admittedly speculative but deeply felt intuition that consciousness is not a random accident in an indifferent universe, but rather the very purpose toward which the cosmic process is evolving. In this view, the universe is not a machine, but an organism, not a thing, but a mind, not a problem, but a mystery, calling us toward deeper engagement. And our authenticity matters to this cosmic mind. Our willingness to be real, to stop pretending, to participate genuinely in the process of becoming, this matters. It contributes something irreplaceable to the unfolding of the whole. This is a radical departure from the materialist worldview that dominates modern thought. In the materialist view, consciousness is an epiphenomenon, a kind of foam on the surface of matter, signifying nothing and contributing nothing to the cosmic process. In this view, it does not matter whether we are authentic or pretending, because either way, we are just arrangements of atoms following deterministic laws. Our inner states have no causal efficacy. no ability to affect the way things unfold. This worldview is itself a form of pretense. The pretense that we already understand the fundamental nature of reality. The pretense that our current scientific paradigm represents the final word. The pretense that mystery has been conquered by method. McKenna rejected this pretense. Not from ignorance. He was deeply familiar with scientific thinking and did not dismiss it casually, but he recognized it for what it was. A partial view, a useful but limited perspective, a map that should not be confused with the territory. And he insisted, based on his own experiences and his study of the great mystical traditions, that consciousness is more fundamental than matter, that mind is not produced by brain, but rather channeled through it, that the inner and the outer are two aspects of a single reality that cannot be divided without violence. In this view, our authenticity is not irrelevant to the cosmic process, it is essential to it. We are participants in something vast and mysterious, and the quality of our participation matters. The universe upgrades you when you stop pretending, because pretense is a form of refusal. A refusal to participate fully, a refusal to show up completely, a refusal to bring your whole self to the encounter with existence. And the universe cannot upgrade what refuses to be upgraded. It cannot transform what will not be transformed. It cannot reveal itself to those who are hiding behind masks. But the moment you stop refusing, the moment you say yes to your own existence, the moment you drop the pretense and stand naked before the mystery, in that moment, the upgrade begins. It is not something you have to earn or achieve. It is simply what happens when you get out of your own way. McKenna often spoke about the psychedelic experience as a kind of reboot of the psychic operating system, a chance to clear out the accumulated bugs and viruses and malware that have been installed by culture and trauma and years of pretense. But the reboot is only valuable if it leads to a new way of operating, a new relationship with oneself and with reality. Many people have profound psychedelic experiences and then return immediately to their pretenses, their defenses, their familiar patterns of falseness. The experience becomes a memory rather than a transformation. The download is received, but never installed. What distinguishes those who are genuinely transformed from those who merely have interesting experiences? McKenna suggested it comes down to courage. The courage to integrate what you have seen. The courage to live differently based on what you now know. The courage to stop pretending even when pretending is easier, safer, more socially acceptable. This courage is not given, it must be developed. It is not a trait you either have or don't have. It is a muscle that grows stronger with use. And every authentic act, every moment of genuine presence, every refusal to participate in pretense is an exercise that strengthens this muscle, making the next authentic act slightly easier, the next moment of presence slightly more accessible. There is a quality of attention that McKenna spoke about frequently, a quality that he considered essential to the process of becoming authentic and receptive to cosmic upgrade. He called it paying attention to attention itself, the reflexive act of becoming aware not just of what you are perceiving, but of how you are perceiving, not just of what you are thinking, but of the very process of thought, not just of what you are feeling, but of the one who feels. This quality of attention is the opposite of the distracted, dissipated, constantly stimulated state that modern life encourages. It is a gathering of awareness, a coming home to the present moment, a willingness to be here rather than constantly escaping into memories or fantasies, or the endless scroll of digital distraction. Pretense thrives on inattention. The false self can only maintain its dominance when we are not looking too closely, when we are too busy, or too distracted, or too numbed to notice the gap between what we project and what we actually are. This is why the culture is so effective at preventing authenticity. It provides endless means of escape, endless ways of avoiding the confrontation with ourselves that attention would force upon us. Television, social media, shopping, working, drinking, drugging. All of these serve, in their own ways, as methods of maintaining inattention, of keeping the gaze directed anywhere but inward, of ensuring that the moment of reckoning is perpetually postponed. But attention cannot be fooled. When we truly pay attention to ourselves, to others, to the world, the pretenses become visible. We begin to see the gap between the mask and the face, the role and the actor, the projected image and the actual inner state. And once we see this gap, we can never unsee it. This is why many people resist attention so fiercely. They sense, correctly, that it threatens the entire structure of their pretense. They prefer the comfortable fog of inattention to the clarity of awareness, because clarity demands change, demands response, demands authenticity. McKenna suggested that the psychedelic state is, among other things, a state of radically enhanced attention. Under the influence of these substances, it becomes impossible not to pay attention. The usual filters and buffers that normally protect us from the full intensity of experience are dissolved, and we are forced to confront what is actually present, including, most terrifyingly, what is actually present within ourselves. This is why the psychedelic experience can be so challenging. It removes the escape hatches, closes the exit doors, and insists that we be here, now, with whatever arises. There is no place to hide, no distraction to flee into, no pretense that can be maintained in the face of that overwhelming presence. But again, the psychedelic experience is only valuable as a training ground, a rehearsal space for the real work of paying attention in ordinary life. And this work is both simpler and more difficult than we might imagine. Simpler, because it requires no special techniques or technologies, just the willingness to be present, to notice what is actually happening, to stay with the moment rather than fleeing from it. More difficult, because everything in our conditioning pulls us away from attention, toward distraction, toward the comfortable numbing that allows us to coast through our days without ever really showing up. McKenna connected this quality of attention to the function of language, which he understood as far more than a mere tool for communication. Language, in McKenna's view, is the primary technology by which we construct our experience of reality. The words we use, the categories we employ, the narratives we tell ourselves, all of these shape what we perceive, what we value, what we consider possible. And crucially, most of the language we use is not our own. It has been given to us, installed in us, inherited from a culture that has its own agenda. We think we are thinking our own thoughts, but in large measure we are thinking the thoughts that have been programmed into us through the medium of language. This linguistic programming is one of the primary mechanisms of pretense. We pretend using the scripts that culture has provided. We perform our roles using the dialogue that has been written for us. And because we are speaking in voices that are not our own, we are perpetually alienated from our authentic self-expression. McKenna's antidote to this was what he called making it new, the creative work of finding fresh language, unexpected metaphors, novel ways of articulating experience that escape the gravitational pull of cliché and convention. When we make it new, we are not just expressing ourselves more accurately, we are actually creating ourselves anew. Language is not just descriptive, it is generative. The words we find become the realities we inhabit. Consider how this relates to the process of cosmic upgrade. When we remain trapped in the inherited language of culture, we remain trapped in the reality that language constructs. We perceive only what the linguistic categories allow us to perceive. We think only what the conceptual frameworks permit us to think. We aspire only to what the cultural narratives define as desirable. But when we begin to find our own language, our own way of articulating our experience, we begin to break free from these constraints. We create new possibilities for perception, thought, and aspiration. We become authors of our own reality, rather than characters in someone else's story. This is why authentic self-expression is so powerful, and why it is so threatening to the status quo. Every genuine utterance challenges the monopoly of inherited language. Every fresh metaphor creates a new clearing in the jungle of cliché. Every honest articulation of actual experience undermines the pretense that we all know what reality is, that it has already been mapped and categorized and safely contained in our conceptual frameworks. The authentic voice is always revolutionary, even when it is quiet, even when it addresses the most personal and intimate matters. Because in speaking truly, it demonstrates that true speech is possible, that we are not condemned to ventriloquize the scripts we have been given. McKenna was himself a master of this kind of authentic self-expression. His lectures and writings are characterized by an extraordinary inventiveness with language, a willingness to coin new terms, to repurpose old words, to build elaborate metaphors that illuminate previously dark corners of experience. He was not content to describe the psychedelic experience using the available vocabulary. He created new vocabulary to meet the demands of what he had encountered. Terms like self-transforming machine elves, or the felt presence of direct experience, or the transcendental object at the end of time. These are not borrowed from any existing tradition. They are attempts to articulate something that existing language could not capture, to make room in linguistic space for experiences that had no home there before. This creative use of language is itself a form of cosmic cooperation. McKenna understood that the universe is not a static thing, but an ongoing process of creative emergence, a perpetual bringing forth of novelty. And when we participate in this process through authentic self-expression, we are aligning ourselves with the deepest currents of cosmic evolution. We are not just talking about creativity, we are being creative in the most fundamental sense possible. We are adding something to the universe that was not there before. We are contributing to the ongoing expansion of what is possible. The connection between attention, language, and authenticity becomes clearer when we consider what happens in their absence. Without attention, we operate on autopilot, running the programs that have been installed in us without any awareness that we are doing so. Without fresh language, we think and speak in cliches, recycling dead formulas that were never alive to begin with. Without authenticity, we perform roles that have been assigned to us, living out scripts written by others for purposes that do not serve our deepest interests. This is the condition of most human beings in modern society, asleep, linguistically impoverished, playing parts in a drama they did not choose. And this is precisely the condition that prevents cosmic upgrade. But the reverse is also true. Attention opens us to the present moment in all its raw intensity. Fresh language allows us to articulate what we actually experience rather than what we are supposed to experience. Authenticity aligns our outer expression with our inner reality. And when these three come together, when we are paying attention, finding our own words, and speaking from genuine presence, something remarkable happens. We become channels for something larger than ourselves. We become instruments through which the creative intelligence of the cosmos can express itself. We become what McKenna called vehicles for the other. This notion of becoming a vehicle for something beyond ourselves is central to McKenna's understanding of the psychedelic experience, but it applies equally to non-ordinary states achieved through meditation, artistic creation, or simple moments of profound presence. In these states, we sense that we are not the source of what is arising, but rather the site, the location, the focal point through which something vast is expressing itself. The ego, with its pretenses and defenses and desperate need for control, steps aside, or is pushed aside, and what flows through is both unmistakably ours and unmistakably beyond us. This is the paradox of authentic expression. It is most truly ourselves when it is least under our control, most genuinely individual when it is most connected to the universal. The universe upgrades you when you stop pretending, because pretense blocks this flow. The false self, the constructed persona, the mask we present to the world, all of these create congestion in the channel, static in the signal, noise in the transmission. When we are pretending, we are essentially saying to the cosmos, I am not available. I am occupied with maintaining this illusion. I cannot receive what you are transmitting because I am too busy transmitting my own fake signal. But when we stop pretending, when we become quiet and present and genuine, the channel opens, the signal comes through, the upgrade downloads. McKenna was fond of saying that the universe is made of language, a provocative claim that can be understood on multiple levels. At the most literal level, it points to the quantum mechanical insight that observation affects what is observed, that the act of measurement shapes the outcome, that consciousness and reality are entangled in ways that classical physics never anticipated. At a deeper level, It suggests that meaning is not something we project onto a meaningless universe, but something inherent in the fabric of existence itself, something that consciousness recognizes because consciousness is made of the same stuff. And at the deepest level, it implies that our authentic speech, our genuine articulation of what we actually experience, participates in the ongoing creation of reality itself. This is not metaphor in the weak sense, a pretty way of talking that doesn't really mean anything. McKenna insisted, based on decades of exploration, that our authentic utterances have causal efficacy in ways that our pretend utterances do not. When we speak from genuine presence, something happens in the world. When we speak from pretense, nothing real is added to the sum of things. The universe can distinguish between authentic and inauthentic speech, just as we can when we are paying attention. It responds to the one and ignores the other. This is why prayers spoken from the heart seem to be answered while rote formulas accomplish nothing. This is why authentic art transforms, while commercial product merely entertains. This is why genuine conversation creates connection, while small talk leaves us empty. The upgrade that the universe offers when we stop pretending is not an improvement in circumstances, although circumstances often do improve as a byproduct. It is not an increase in power, although power in the genuine sense, the ability to act effectively in alignment with truth, does increase. It is not even greater happiness, although something deeper than happiness emerges. The upgrade is an expansion of being itself, a widening of the aperture through which we receive and transmit the cosmic signal, an increase in the bandwidth available for the exchange between individual and universal. We become more fully ourselves by becoming more fully connected to everything else. We realize our uniqueness by dissolving into the whole. We find our authentic voice by learning to channel the voice of the cosmos. The process McKenna described is not one of addition, but of subtraction. We do not become more authentic by adding new layers of sophistication to our pretenses. We do not upgrade by accumulating more credentials, more achievements, more markers of status and success. These additions may serve their purposes in the social world, but they contribute nothing to the essential work. The work is not about becoming more, it is about becoming less defended, less armored, less hidden behind the accumulated structures of false selfhood. The upgrade comes not from what we gain, but from what we lose. The pretenses, the poses, the performances that have been separating us from ourselves and from the living mystery of existence. This is what the mystical traditions have always taught, each in their own way. The via negativa of Christian mysticism, the neti-neti of Hindu philosophy, the emptiness teachings of Buddhism, all point toward this same fundamental insight. The truth of what we are is revealed not by adding more content to consciousness, but by removing the false content that obscures it. We are not building a better self. We are excavating the authentic self that has always been there, buried under the rubble of cultural programming and defensive adaptation. The treasure is already present. We need only clear away the dirt that covers it. McKenna often described this process using the metaphor of peeling an onion. Layer after layer of pretense must be removed, each one revealing another beneath it. And there is a fear, which he acknowledged, that if we keep peeling, we will eventually find nothing at the center, that the self is nothing but layers, masks all the way down, with no face beneath them. This fear is itself part of the programming, part of the pretense's defense system. It keeps us from going too deep, from investigating too thoroughly, from risking the total dissolution of everything we have taken ourselves to be. But McKenna's experience, and the testimony of the great mystics across traditions, is that the fear is unfounded. When the last layer is removed, what remains is not nothing but everything. What remains is not void but presence, not absence but fullness, not death but life more abundant than anything the pretending self could imagine. The false self fears annihilation because it cannot conceive of existence without boundaries, without definition, without the markers that distinguish self from other. But the authentic self, the awareness that remains when all content has been released, discovers that boundlessness is not annihilation but liberation. That definition was always limitation. that the markers were always arbitrary. This discovery is what McKenna called the secret, the open secret that has been whispered by sages and shamans throughout human history, but that each individual must discover for themselves. The secret cannot be told because it is not a piece of information that can be transmitted through language. It can only be pointed toward, gestured at, indicated through metaphor and paradox, and the silence between words. And the pointing is valuable only to the extent that it inspires the listener to stop listening and start looking, to stop accumulating descriptions and start having the experience that is being described. The universe upgrades you when you stop pretending, because pretense is fundamentally a refusal to receive this secret. It is a clutching at the known, a grasping for the familiar, a desperate attempt to maintain control in the face of the uncontrollable mystery. And the secret will not force itself upon the unwilling. It waits, patient as eternity, for the moment when we are ready to receive it. This readiness is what authenticity creates. By letting go of pretense, we create space. By releasing our grip on the false, we open our hands to receive the true. By dying to what we have imagined ourselves to be, we are born into what we actually are. McKenna connected this process to what he perceived as the larger arc of cosmic evolution, the progressive complexification of matter and consciousness over billions of years, leading inexorably towards some unimaginable omega point, some consummation of the entire process in a form we cannot currently conceive. He called this the transcendental object at the end of time, and while his specific theories about time wave zero and calendrical predictions have been widely criticized, the underlying intuition deserves attention. The universe, McKenna believed, is not running down but building up. It is not heading toward heat death and entropic dissolution, but toward increasing novelty, complexity, and consciousness. And human beings, in our current state of development, are not the endpoint of this process, but participants in it, perhaps even catalysts for its acceleration. In this view, the individual work of becoming authentic is not merely personal. It has cosmic significance. When you stop pretending and allow the authentic self to emerge, you are contributing something essential to the evolutionary process. You are adding your unique configuration of consciousness to the growing complexity of the whole. You are becoming a node through which novelty can enter the world. This is not grandiosity, or if it is a grandiosity that applies equally to every being who undertakes this work. We are all potential catalysts. We all have something irreplaceable to contribute. But the contribution cannot be made through pretense. Only the authentic self has access to the unique gift that each of us carries. McKenna spoke of this gift in terms of what he called the imagination. Not the shallow imagination of fantasy and escapism, but the deep imagination that is the creative source of reality itself. This imagination is not something we possess. It is something we participate in. When we access it authentically, we become co-creators with the cosmos, adding our creative impulse to the ongoing generation of novelty. But when we remain trapped in pretense, the imagination remains dormant, potential unrealized, creativity stillborn. The pretending self cannot create. It can only imitate. It can only recycle what already exists, rearranging familiar elements into familiar patterns. Genuine novelty requires the authentic self, because only authenticity has access to the source. This is why so much of modern culture feels derivative, recycled, exhausted. It is produced by pretending selves for pretending consumers, a closed loop of inauthenticity in which nothing genuinely new can emerge. The same stories are told again and again with slight variations. The same products are sold with slightly different packaging. The same ideas are expressed in slightly different words. There is motion, but no movement. Activity, but no action. Noise, but no music. And behind it all, the authentic creative source waits, unused and increasingly desperate to express itself through beings who have forgotten how to listen. The upgrade that the universe offers is, in this sense, an upgrade of creative capacity. When you stop pretending, you become available as a channel for genuine novelty. Ideas begin to flow through you that are not recycled from the cultural database. Perceptions open that are not filtered through the inherited categories. Possibilities appear that were invisible from within the prison of the false self. You begin to participate in the creative unfolding of reality in a way that was simply impossible while you were maintaining pretenses. You become, as McKenna liked to say, a friend of the imagination, and the imagination, in turn, becomes your friend, revealing its secrets, offering its gifts, inviting you into collaborative play. This collaborative play is what McKenna experienced most vividly in the psychedelic state, particularly in his encounters with what he called the self-transforming machine elves of DMT hyperspace. Whatever ontological status we assign to these entities, and McKenna himself was agnostic on this question, the phenomenology is significant. In these encounters, there is a quality of exchange, of relationship, of genuine meeting between the human visitor and the entities encountered. And McKenna observed that the quality of this meeting depended heavily on the quality of presence brought to it. When the visitor arrived with pretenses intact, defensive and armored, and trying to maintain control, the encounter remained at the surface. But when the visitor arrived open, present, authentically curious, the entities responded in kind, offering gifts of insight and creative transmission that could be brought back to ordinary reality. This principle, that the quality of what we encounter depends on the quality of presence we bring, applies not just to DMT entities, but to everything. The world we meet is shaped by how we meet it. When we approach reality with pretense, we encounter a pretend reality, a surface of appearances that never reveals its depths. When we approach reality with authenticity, we encounter an authentic reality, a living mystery that discloses itself progressively to those who come with genuine intent. The cosmos, McKenna intuited, is not indifferent to how we show up. It responds to authenticity the way a person responds to being truly seen, by revealing more of itself, by opening up, by entering into relationship. The implication is staggering. By becoming authentic, we do not merely change our own experience, we change what there is to experience. We participate in the creation of reality, not as omnipotent gods, but as co-creators in an ongoing process. The universe is not finished, it is still being made, and our authentic participation, our willingness to show up as we actually are, to perceive without filters, to respond without scripts, adds something to the making. We are not passive recipients of a reality that exists independently of us. We are active participants in a reality that is coming into being through our participation. And the quality of our participation matters. Pretense subtracts from reality. Authenticity adds to it. The choice is ours, and it is being made in every moment. McKenna emphasized that this choice is not made once and for all, but must be made continuously, in the face of constant pressure to revert to pretense. The false self does not disappear. It merely loses its grip. It waits in the wings, ready to reassert itself the moment attention lapses. The cultural programming does not erase. It merely loses its hypnotic power. The habits of a lifetime do not vanish. They merely become options rather than compulsions. The work of authenticity is never finished because we are never finished. We are processes, not things. We are ongoing becomings, not static beings. And the becoming can always go in either direction, toward greater authenticity and deeper participation in the creative unfolding, or toward greater pretense and deeper entanglement in the illusory world of false selfhood. This ongoing choice is what gives human existence its drama, its significance, its ultimate seriousness. We are not insignificant specks in a vast, indifferent cosmos. We are crucially important participants in a cosmic process that needs our authentic contribution. Every moment is an opportunity to choose authenticity over pretense, presence over distraction, truth over convenience. And every choice ripples outward in ways we cannot fully trace, affecting not just our own lives, but the larger fabric of reality itself. The universe upgrades you when you stop pretending, because your non-pretending matters. Your authenticity counts. You are needed, not as a pretend version of yourself, but as the actual being you were born to be. The question that naturally arises is, how? How do we stop pretending when pretense has become so deeply ingrained that we can no longer distinguish it from authenticity? How do we access the true self when the false self has grown so strong, so cunning, so adept at disguising itself? How do we wake up from a dream when the dream includes the conviction that we are already awake? These are the practical questions that confront anyone who takes seriously McKenna's invitation to authenticity, and they deserve practical consideration. McKenna himself offered several approaches, none of which he presented as universally applicable or guaranteed to work. The most famous, of course, was the psychedelic path, the judicious use of plant medicines and synthetic compounds to temporarily dissolve the structures of pretense and reveal the authentic ground beneath. He was unambiguous about the power of these tools when used properly. 5 dried grams in silent darkness, he famously advised, referring to psilocybin mushrooms, not as a recreational experience, but as a serious confrontation with the depths of one's own being. In such a state, pretense becomes nearly impossible to maintain. The usual defenses simply do not work. You are left naked before yourself and before the mystery, with no mask to hide behind. But McKenna was also clear that psychedelics are not for everyone and are not the only path. He respected the traditions that achieved similar states through meditation, through fasting, through breathwork, through extreme physical practices, through devotional surrender. What all these approaches have in common is that they disrupt the normal functioning of the pretending self. They create conditions in which the usual habits of mind cannot operate. They open a gap in the armor through which something else can enter, or rather, through which something that was always there can finally emerge. The key insight, which McKenna returned to again and again, is that authenticity is not something we achieve, but something we allow. It is our natural state, prior to the distortions of conditioning and the accumulations of pretense. We do not have to create it. We only have to stop blocking it. This is good news and bad news. Good news, because it means the transformation we seek is not far away, is not difficult to reach, is not reserved for the spiritually elite. Bad news, because it means we are responsible for our own imprisonment. We are not victims of external forces. We are perpetrators of internal suppression. The pretense is something we do, not something done to us, and only we can stop doing it. This brings us to what might be called the paradox of effort in the spiritual path. On the one hand, we must make effort, we must practice, we must pay attention, we must choose authenticity over pretense again and again. On the other hand, the effort itself can become another form of pretense, the pretense of being a spiritual seeker, the pose of the person working on themselves, the performance of personal growth. Many people get trapped in this secondary layer of pretense, substituting the appearance of spiritual work for the reality of it, collecting experiences and insights and techniques without ever actually allowing the fundamental transformation to occur. McKenna was suspicious of what he called the professional holy person, the figure who has made a career out of spirituality, who performs enlightenment without necessarily embodying it. He preferred what he called the amateur, the person who approaches the mystery with genuine curiosity rather than professional obligation, who is willing to be surprised, who has not already decided what they will find. This amateur spirit is itself a form of authenticity. It says, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't have it figured out. I'm genuinely exploring, genuinely uncertain, genuinely open to whatever arises. This is the opposite of the pretense that claims to know, claims to have arrived, claims to be operating from a position of established authority. The practices that facilitate authenticity, whatever form they take, share certain characteristics. They involve stillness, the willingness to stop the perpetual motion that keeps us distracted from ourselves. They involve attention, the gathering of awareness into the present moment rather than its dispersal into memories and fantasies. They involve honesty, the ruthless self-examination that refuses to accept the comfortable lies we tell ourselves. They involve courage, the willingness to face what arises, however uncomfortable, rather than fleeing back into the familiar territory of pretense. And they involve surrender, The recognition that we cannot control the process, that we must allow something larger than ourselves to guide us, that the authentic self will emerge in its own time and its own way. McKenna spoke often about the importance of what he called the felt presence of direct experience, the insistence on first-hand encounter rather than second-hand description. This is perhaps the most practical guideline he offered. Ask yourself, in any given moment, am I having an actual experience, or am I having thoughts about experience? Am I present to what is actually happening, or am I filtering it through concepts and categories and inherited interpretations? Am I meeting reality directly, or am I meeting my ideas about reality? The question itself, asked sincerely, tends to shift something. It creates a gap in the pretense through which authentic perception can flow. This practice of direct experience applies not just to extraordinary states, but to the most ordinary moments of daily life. The taste of your food, the sensation of water on your skin, the quality of light in the room, the feeling of your body as you move through space. All of these are opportunities for authentic presence. We do not have to wait for special circumstances or achieve special states. The authentic is always available, in every moment, if we are willing to pay attention to it, rather than to our thoughts about it. The universe is continuously offering itself to us. We are continuously declining the offer in favor of our mental constructions. McKenna also emphasized the importance of what he called culture as the enemy of the imagination, the recognition that the social environment we live in is actively working against our authenticity. This is not a conspiracy theory. It is simply an observation about how culture functions. Culture is a self-perpetuating system that needs compliant participants to maintain itself. It has a vested interest in keeping us pretending, in ensuring that we continue to play our assigned roles, in preventing the kind of authentic awakening that might lead us to question the entire arrangement. And it achieves this through countless means. Through the narratives it tells us about who we are and what is possible, through the distractions it provides, through the punishments it administers to those who deviate too far from the script. To become authentic, then, requires a kind of resistance to culture, not a hostile or paranoid resistance, but a clear-eyed recognition that culture is not neutral, that it has its own agenda, and that this agenda does not align with our deepest interests. This recognition creates space for something different. It allows us to see cultural programming as programming, rather than as self-evident reality. It gives us the option of choosing differently, of writing our own scripts, of finding our own way, rather than following the paths that have been laid out for us. This is not about rejecting everything cultural. That would be both impossible and undesirable. It is about relating to culture consciously, rather than unconsciously, selectively, rather than compulsively, as a resource, rather than as a master. The process of becoming authentic often involves periods of social isolation, not as an endpoint, but as a necessary phase. We have been shaped so thoroughly by social mirrors that we cannot see ourselves except as others see us. We need time away from these mirrors to begin to discover who we are when no one is watching, when no social role is required, when we are simply ourselves. This is why wilderness experiences, meditation retreats, and other forms of intentional isolation have been valued by seekers throughout history. They create conditions in which the social self can be set aside and the authentic self can begin to emerge. But the isolation must eventually give way to reintegration. The authentic self is not meant to live in a cave. It is meant to bring its gifts back to the world, to participate in the human community from a place of genuine presence rather than defensive pretense. This reintegration is often the most challenging part of the process. It is one thing to be authentic when alone. It is another to maintain authenticity in the face of social pressure, cultural expectation, and the countless subtle invitations to return to pretense. This is where the real work happens, in the daily encounters that test our commitment to truth. McKenna was himself a model of this kind of reintegrated authenticity. He was not a recluse. He engaged with culture, gave lectures, wrote books, participated in the conversation of his time. But he did so from a place of genuine presence, saying what he actually thought rather than what was expected, following his own fascinations rather than the trends of the marketplace, maintaining his unique voice even when it made him difficult to categorize or dismissed by the mainstream. He paid a price for this authenticity: marginalization, ridicule, the constant need to defend himself against misunderstanding. But he also received the rewards: a life fully lived, a voice that continues to resonate decades later, a legacy of genuine contribution to human culture. The path McKenna modeled is available to anyone. It does not require special gifts or favorable circumstances. It only requires the willingness to stop pretending, to pay attention to what is actually present, to speak from genuine experience rather than inherited convention. The universe is waiting, has always been waiting, for us to show up as we actually are. The upgrade is prepared. The download is ready. All that remains is for us to clear the channel, to get out of our own way, to allow the transformation that the cosmos has been trying to give us since the moment we were born. There is one final aspect of McKenna's vision that deserves consideration, one that moves beyond the individual journey toward what might be called the collective dimension of authenticity. McKenna believed that we are living in a unique moment in human history, a moment when the accumulated pretenses of thousands of years of civilization are reaching some kind of critical threshold. The structures that have maintained themselves through inertia and collective agreement are beginning to shake. The narratives that have organized human life are beginning to lose their grip. The systems that have dominated and exploited and suppressed are beginning to reveal their fundamental unsustainability. In this situation, individual authenticity takes on a significance that extends far beyond personal benefit. When you stop pretending, you do not merely improve your own life, you contribute to a shift that is happening at the collective level. You add your weight to the side of truth in a cosmic struggle between authenticity and pretense. You become an agent of the transformation that is trying to happen, a participant in the birth of something new. The universe upgrades you, yes, but through you, it is also upgrading itself, using the cleared channels of authentic individuals to introduce novelty into the collective field. McKenna spoke of this in terms of what he called the archaic revival, the idea that humanity is not moving towards some never-before-seen future, so much as returning to a mode of existence that was abandoned long ago, a way of being that was common in prehistory, before the developments of agriculture, cities, and hierarchical civilization. In this archaic mode, human beings lived in intimate relationship with the natural world, with each other, and with the invisible dimensions of reality accessed through altered states. There was no need for pretense because the authentic self was not suppressed. There was no need for complex defense mechanisms because the environment was not constantly attacking the psyche. There was direct experience, genuine connection, and a sense of participation in the living cosmos that modern people can barely imagine. We cannot return to prehistory, and McKenna was not suggesting that we should try. But we can, he believed, recover something of that archaic sensibility while incorporating the genuine advances that historical development has brought. We can combine the wisdom of the ancestors with the knowledge of the moderns. We can find a synthesis that includes both the direct experience valued by indigenous cultures and the analytical power developed by Western science. This synthesis is what the collective transformation might look like. Not a rejection of modernity, but its transcendence. Not a return to the past, but a spiral upward that incorporates the past's wisdom while moving towards something genuinely new. The role of the authentic individual in this collective transformation is to serve as what McKenna called an antenna for the other, a receiver and transmitter of the signals coming from the future, the signals that carry the blueprint for what humanity might become. These signals cannot be received by the pretending self, which is tuned to the frequencies of the past, locked into patterns that were established long ago. Only the authentic self, freed from the static of inherited programming, can pick up the new transmissions. Only the cleared channel can carry the new message, and the more individuals who clear their channels, the stronger the collective signal becomes. This is not a call to messianic delusion. McKenna was explicitly opposed to the guru model, the idea that one enlightened individual would lead the masses to salvation. He believed in what he called the democracy of the mystery, the idea that everyone has equal access to the depths, that no one has a monopoly on truth, that the transformation must happen in each individual for themselves. He was not asking people to follow him. He was asking them to follow their own authentic unfolding, wherever it might lead. The collective transformation, if it happens, will not be orchestrated by some central authority. It will emerge from the combined authenticity of millions of individuals, each contributing their unique piece to the puzzle, each adding their voice to the chorus. The urgency that McKenna felt, and that many feel today with even greater intensity, comes from the sense that time may be running out. The pretenses that have organized human civilization are not sustainable. The environmental destruction, the social fragmentation, the psychological suffering, the spiritual bankruptcy. These are not problems that can be solved within the framework that created them. They require a fundamental shift, a reorientation at the deepest level, a collective decision to stop pretending and start being real. And this shift, if it is to happen, must happen soon. The window of opportunity may not remain open indefinitely, but urgency should not become desperation. One of McKenna's most valuable insights was that the universe has a way of surprising us, of introducing novelty just when things seem most hopeless, of opening doors that we didn't know existed. The linear extrapolation of current trends is not a reliable guide to the future. Transformation happens in discontinuous jumps, in phase transitions, in sudden reorganizations of the entire system. And these transformations are impossible to predict from within the framework that is being transcended. What looks like inevitable doom from within the pretense may look entirely different from the perspective of authenticity. The practical implication is that we should focus on what we can actually do, which is our own inner work, our own journey from pretense to authenticity, while remaining open to the collective transformation that may or may not unfold. We cannot force the collective to wake up. We cannot make others stop pretending. We can only work on ourselves and trust that this work contributes something to the larger process. The universe upgrades individuals one at a time, and the collective upgrade, if it happens, will be the cumulative result of millions of individual upgrades. McKenna's vision, finally, is one of profound hope. Not the naive hope that everything will work out without our participation, but the grounded hope that authentic participation makes a difference, that the cosmos is responsive to our genuine efforts, that we are not alone in this strange journey through existence. The universe wants us to stop pretending. It has been sending us messages for millennia, through dreams and visions and synchronicities, and the inexplicable events that punctuate ordinary life. It has provided us with teachers and teachings, with plants and practices, with everything we need to make the transition from false to true. What remains is for us to accept the invitation, to stop waiting for permission, to stop looking for guarantees, to take the leap that has been asking to be taken since the moment we first intuited that there was more to life than the surface we had been shown. The universe upgrades you when you stop pretending, but you must actually stop. You must actually release your grip on the familiar pretenses, step out of the comfortable patterns, risk the uncertainty of genuine transformation. The upgrade is not automatic. It requires your active participation, your conscious choice, your willingness to die to what you have been, so that you can be born into what you might become. This is the message that McKenna left us, wrapped in his extraordinary language and illustrated with his decades of exploration. It is not an easy message, and he never pretended it was. But it is a true message, verified by the experience of countless seekers across cultures and centuries. The authentic self is real. The universe is responsive. The transformation is possible. And the only thing standing between you and the upgrade that has been prepared for you since before time began is the pretense that you are something other than what you actually are. Let go of that pretense. Let go of it now. Let go of everything you have been told to be, everything you have tried to become, everything you have defended and protected and hidden behind. Let go of the mask and discover the face. Let go of the role and discover the actor. Let go of the pretense and discover the presence that has been waiting, patient and luminous, at the very center of your being. The universe is ready. Are you?